welcome to the Deep Dive. You know, the NFL is this incredible mix, isn't it? Peak athleticism, massive business, but yet it's definitely no stranger to controversy. And right at the heart of some of that, especially lately, is the league's most crucial position, the quarterback. So today, we're taking a deep dive into an issue that's been, well, swirling around star players and team owners for a while now, this whole concept of collusion. Our mission really is to unpack the cases of two major quarterbacks. We've got Lamar Jackson, of course, and then this emerging situation with Shedeur Sanders and the Cleveland Browns. We want to understand how NFL owners might be, well, maybe banding together to suppress QB salaries and kind of stifle player control. So just to be clear, when we talk about collusion here, what we mean is it's when multiple teams or owners conspire to undermine someone's legal rights, basically agreeing not to compete for a player or working together to hold down salary offers, maybe even denying legitimate opportunities.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating here is how these situations kind of pull back the curtain on the hidden power dynamics in the NFL. It raises some big questions, questions about what this all means for the future of the league's most important position. We'll try to connect these specific stories, these sagas, to the bigger picture of owner influence and labor dynamics.
Right. So by the end of this deep dive, you should walk away with a much clearer understanding of why these situations get so complex and what's really truly at stake for players and teams. Okay, let's start by setting the stage a bit. The economics of it. It's almost a given in the NFL, right? If you don't have a top-tier quarterback, your team is often stuck, just perpetually rebuilding. And when a team does find that star passer, boom, record-breaking contracts usually follow.
Exactly. And that rapid rise in QB salaries has certainly stoked some anxieties among the owners, worries about the growing power and, frankly, the cost at that position. Now, the pressure to contain salaries isn't brand new, but the last decade, wow, the contract numbers have just exploded.
And just to reiterate that definition of collusion we mentioned. In the NFL context, it's when two or more teams, or maybe the league and its members, agree, could be formally, could be informally, not to compete for a player. And it's crucial to remember the NFL's collective bargaining agreement, the CBA, strictly forbids this explicitly.
Yeah, they do. And the league has actually paid out pretty handsomely in the past for violations, most notably back during the free agency period in the late 80s, early 90s.
No challenge now.
Well, the challenge, of course, is that hard evidence is often just elusive. So much of this could be happening over, informal calls, texts, maybe through intermediaries, which raises that big question. How do you actually prove it happened in a way that, holds up?
That really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? If it's all happening behind closed doors, how do you even begin to build that case?
Well, let's dive into maybe the prime example of this recently, the Lamar Jackson case. He's the 2019 NFL MVP, and he's really become the face of these modern QB movement controversies. His contract situation was a massive story. Jackson was seeking a fully guaranteed deal, something like what Deshaun Watson got, which was north of $230 million.
Right. And Baltimore's response. They placed the non-exclusive franchise tag on him. Now, for anyone unfamiliar, this basically allowed him to negotiate with other teams, but crucially, it let the Ravens keep the right to match any offer he got. Or, if they didn't match, they'd get back some significant draft picks as compensation. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Almost immediately after Jackson could start talking to other teams, something pretty unprecedented seemed to happen. Suddenly, you had several teams that definitely needed a quarterback publicly and very quickly saying, nope, we're not pursuing Jackson. We're talking teams like the Atlanta Falcons, Carolina Panthers, Washington Commanders, others too, releasing these public denials within hours or days.
Yeah, and this rapid, almost like synchronized series of public statements from so many teams. And critically, this was before any of them seemed to have even contacted Jackson or his agent. Well, it appeared highly suspicious to observers, critics, analysts, and definitely to the NFL Players Association, the NFLPA.
So what was really at stake here, if you look at it from the owner's perspective? Well, Jackson's push for that guaranteed deal threatened to set a huge precedent. Owners clearly had a shared financial reason to maybe freeze Jackson's market. They were afraid, it seems, of fully guaranteed contracts becoming the norm across the whole league.
In essence, the thinking might have been, if Lamar Jackson can't get that Watson-level guaranteed money, then maybe nobody else can either, at least not easily. And the NFLPA certainly pointed to patterns they saw, things like no real exploratory talks happening between Jackson and teams that needed a QB. Then you had leaked reports, anonymous execs saying things like nobody wants to give out Watson-type deals. And then that just suspiciously uniform, we're not interested, message coming from multiple places.
Okay, but let me just play devil's advocate for a second here. Couldn't a team reasonably argue they just weren't a good fit, maybe financially or strategically, for a player like Jackson at that kind of price? I mean, how do you really distinguish a legitimate business decision from something more coordinated?
Well, yeah, that's the absolute core of the challenge, isn't it? Teams will always claim independent decision-making. They'll cite cap space, roster needs, offensive scheme fit, whatever. Yeah. But when you see so many teams, especially teams with a really obvious need at quarterback, issue near identical public statements in such a tight time frame, it just raises serious questions about whether there was some kind of informal understanding, The consistency, the timing of the message is what many found problematic, not just the individual decisions themselves.
Right. So in the end, Jackson did strike a deal. A significant one, but notably not fully guaranteed. He stayed with Baltimore. And that collusion question, it remains sort of unresolved, legally speaking. But the whole episode certainly laid bare the dynamics at play. And if you thought the Lamar Jackson situation was maybe just a one-off, well, the whispers around Shedeur Sanders suggest we might be seeing a very familiar playbook unfolding again. He's, of course, the son of Hall of Famer Deion Sanders and a really hot prospect, a rising college quarterback star. So now reports and leaks are suggesting a picture that looks, well, kind of similar to the Jackson scenario. These alleged tactics. We're hearing about multiple teams that could use a quarterback, including Cleveland, apparently, suddenly and publicly declaring they'd pass on Sanders, again, seemingly without doing full due diligence first.
Yeah, the underlying message that seems to be filtering through the league suggests maybe a coordinated effort, an effort to stop Sanders from using his market value, which might include demanding guaranteed money to really dictate his contract terms. There have been reports of insider conversations mentioning concerns about, quote, quarterback control and the need for ownership discipline, which, let's be honest, is often code for resisting those kind of market-busting deals that started surfacing after Watson's contract.
So, okay, the parallels to Lamar Jackson seem pretty clear then. You got the public denials.
Yeah.
The financial motivations, basically, avoiding another potential Watson-type scenario.
Right.
And then this whole factor of player empowerment, this new generation of QBs, they're young, they're media savvy, they seem much more willing to bet on themselves, use their public platforms, and really push for these transformative deals.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? These players today, they aren't just athletes, they're practically brands. They have this direct line to fans, to the media. That gives them a different kind of leverage than maybe past generations had. And that shift, well, it fundamentally changes the power dynamic in contract talks.
Okay, so we've looked at these cases. The big question then becomes, why? Why are owners so fundamentally wary of quarterback dominance? It seems to boil down to something that's been called the 32-team paradox.
Right. The paradox is essentially this. The NFL, as a league, is incredibly sensitive to the idea of parity, competitive balance, the whole league structure, those massive TV deals, the merchandising, how money is shared. It kind of depends on the idea that any team can realistically compete each year, or at least have a shot. So the fear is, if individual quarterbacks become so powerful that they can dictate huge salaries, demand specific contract terms, maybe even influence roster construction across all 32 teams, then maybe a handful of franchises could gain these sort of irreversible competitive advantages. And that would disrupt the NFL's whole competitive balance doctrine.
Right. So faced with that fear, owners seem to have this, well, it's unstated, but you can observe it, this interest in keeping quarterback money somewhat in check. Which leads to this idea of the quarterback minimum principle.
Exactly. And the methods they might use for this, based on what we can gather from reports and analyses, include things like soft pedaling new contract precedents, quietly discouraging those outlier guaranteed deals, maybe behind the scenes, and trying to make sure that singular mega deals like Watson's stay as anomalies, not the new standard. The underlying goal seems pretty clear. It's about labor cost containment, fundamentally, and preserving the owner's authority over roster-building decisions.
Now, let's talk about the legal side for a minute. Proving collusion. The burden of proof is high. It legally requires actual evidence of an agreement or coordination. And that's incredibly difficult, isn't it? Given the NFL's, powerful internal communication networks, all those back-channel relationships. Most teams, quite understandably, will just claim they made independent decisions based on perfectly plausible business reasons.
Absolutely. But despite those obstacles, the threat of collusion lawsuits, especially when backed by the NFLPA, can still have a bit of a chilling effect on owner actions. It might force teams to be, let's say, more circumspect, more careful in their public statements, and maybe how they conduct negotiations.
What's really fascinating here, though, is this precedent problem you mentioned earlier. The Jackson case, and now potentially Sanders's, they set a kind of unofficial benchmark, maybe. If owners appear willing to effectively blackball, and I use that term carefully, an MVP or a top prospect just to maintain salary discipline, well, then the bar for proving explicit collusion in other cases stays incredibly high, which is a huge challenge for players trying to fight it.
It is. But looking ahead, quarterbacks actually have, well, arguably more leverage now than they ever have before, thanks to things like social media, player-led branding, this whole rise of athlete activism. Attempts to suppress player movement or earnings, they just instantly become public firestorms now.
Yeah, it's true. While we haven't quite seen the full NBA-style player empowerment era cross over into the NFL yet.
Not quite.
The Jackson and Sanders controversies definitely feel like early tremors, like something is shifting.
I think so too. And this leads to some pretty significant future implications. You can bet the next time the CBA is negotiated, quarterback rights and guaranteed contracts will be a central battlefield. Absolutely central. And also, you see increasingly, fans and the media seem to be siding more with players when they push for market-level pay and the right to choose where they play, that public pressure. That's another form of leverage that players wield now, maybe more effectively than ever before. Hashtag, tag, tag, outro, intro.
So let's try to wrap this up. The Lamar Jackson situation and now this developing Shedeur Sanders, Cleveland Browns controversy. They really exemplify these enduring tensions right at the heart of the NFL, don't they? It's that constant push and pull, the quest for player empowerment versus collective owner control.
Exactly. The league's owners, understandably wary of any one position, or maybe even one single player, dictating the fate of $32 billion franchises. They have really strong incentives to act collectively, even if that cooperation kind of skirts the edges of legality.
Right. And going forward, these cases are probably going to serve as templates, wouldn't you think, for both legal challenges and for labor negotiation strategies. Whether explicit collusion can ever be decisively proven in a court of law, maybe that matters less than the patterns. These unmistakably coordinated patterns that are now visible to players, agents, fans, really anyone invested in the future of the NFL quarterback. The battle for control, that right to truly, quote, dominate the 32 teams, well, it seems far from over. And hopefully now, you, the listener, have a much clearer picture of what's really going on behind the scenes.